computer. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode, one of the final ones of the season of Essence Podcast, Into the Woods, in which I interview all sorts of spiritual practitioners and other interesting folk. And I have today somebody I am very excited to have on, Devin Hunter. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you for having me.
You're
I
very
am
welcome.
super stoked to be here.
Oh, you're so I'm really pleased to hear that. I'll be honest with you. I've been trying to collect your household, so you're the third one. So I'm really pleased that you're here.
We can work on number 4. Number 4 is pretty hard to get though. Number 4 is pretty elusive. Yeah.
I have heard many stories about that. Now, I think
elusive.
most people reading or watching this, listening to this, will already know who you are. For those few people who may be finding this in 100 years' time and they don't know who you are, let's just read your bio here. So Devin Hunter is there we go. Devin Hunter is the best-selling author of The Witch's Book of Power, The Witch's Book of Spirits, and The Witch's Book of Mysteries, the critically acclaimed Modern Witch, and Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, which is a wonderful, beautiful book. Initiated into multiple occult orders, Devin is the founder of the Sacred Fires tradition of witchcraft and co-founder of the Black Rose tradition of witchcraft. He hosts the Modern Witch podcast, which I was on a few months ago, recommended by both the AV Club and Glamour, and he's co-owner of Datura Trading Company. Visit him at modernwitch.com/Devin. And you're also you're involved with the astrology series by Evo, and you've been writing all sorts of things all over the place. You're also a fiction author under a different name too. You have a lot of books under your name.
I like to write. That's a recent. Surprisingly, it's a recent discovery, but I enjoy writing. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of it.
Well, okay, let's start out with that. We've actually been talking for now an hour and a half as we record now, right? So you actually just finished saying privately that you only just started thinking of yourself as an author.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest, like it made sense when you said it, but it also shocked me because you have such a large rap sheet. A large number of things.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I
get back into it.
So I wrote like fiction stuff when I was younger, when I was like a kid, and I had won like a little local writer thing, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll do this one day, and I'd like to do that. But it was in the same way that like I wanted to be a singer and I wanted to be a blah blah blah, and I knew that I was decent at writing just compared to like people I went to school with and stuff like that because of that, but I hadn't really, there was no there. I wrote some fiction stuff, wrote a novel that no one was ever going to see. It is going to remain in the locked away somewhere. And I gave everything. I just kind of went away and I didn't think about writing for years. And then I got this podcast and I started doing my podcast, Modern Witch, which we're now 14 years into doing Modern Witch podcast.
Yeah.
And I was I had written just before I had written a book called Universal Witch, which was supposed to be this kind of universal approach to witchcraft kind of a thing. And it was horrible. And
was
it was
that one that when you were 19, right?
Yes, that was when I wrote when I was 19.
Yeah.
And I sent it into Llewellyn and Weiser, and I got a very polite rejection letter from both of them, which was wonderful. And I just gave up. I didn't think about it. I thought one day it'll happen if I do. And I just really wasn't going to let myself have a dream that I didn't know I was going to be able to fulfill. So years later, I start my podcast, and I have this itch that because I was doing really well. Like the podcast was insanely well. It was doing really, really good. And I thought, okay, and I'd been going to, there's a conference here called PantheaCon here in California that went on for many, many moons. And Llewellyn and Weiser both showed up to it, and they had suites and everything. And so I went to a PantheaCon, and the woman who became my editor was there with Llewellyn. And we started talking, and she knew exactly who I was, and there was this interest, and I went, oh, okay, let's do it. I'm going to go to this thing. And so I ended up doing a pitch, and she loved it. And I got offered a contract. And so it felt like I had gotten the opportunity because of my podcast. And so I just really looked at myself as a podcaster who had gotten the opportunity to write a book. And I hadn't really, inside I had always wanted to, of course, right? Like I said, I always had that in me, but I hadn't really given myself the chance to go after it in that way. And the way that I know other people have with their writing career. And so, one thing led to another. And I didn't write the first book that I wanted to write, which is actually Modern Witch. That's the pictorial that came out a couple years ago. Instead, I ended up writing the Witch Power series. And it was not at all my intention. I was not going down that road. And then that's the road I ended up stepping down. And I'm very happy with those books, but it wasn't my original intention. And I just kind of, for a long time, I had thought of myself as just this guy who writes, but I didn't really think of myself as a writer. I didn't really think of myself as an author. And it wasn't until I had finished Horticulture, which is the book that's coming out this spring.
Beautiful,
that
by the way.
I'm so excited about it. It was so fun. It was so fun. I think out of all the books I've written, and I love all of them, they're all my kids, but Horticulture and Houseplant Horticulture, and I have a very special relationship. And it's a very special book to me, and I'm really excited about it getting out there. But so I just was in this place and I didn't really think of myself like that. And then I finished Horticulture, and people may or may not know this, I'm obsessed with science fiction. I love science fiction. And I've got plenty of stories in my head and things. And I thought, if I can channel 33 spirits and put them in a book, why couldn't I channel some characters and put them in a book?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And so I did. And so I started writing this novella series called The Chronicles of Calamity. And which is really, it's a cosmic YA sci-fi, like thriller horror kind of thing. And it gets really intense. And I just freaking loved it. I fell in love with the universe. I fell in love with the concept of the things that are going on. And I just found myself feeling home, like I was at home, and in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. Like I felt like I could build something here and I could do something. So I just went with it. So I have 3 novellas out. There's gonna be 5 in the because I'm gonna have to clean it up, wrap it up soon. Yeah. But so there's gonna be 5, but there's 3 are out now. And I just have them on Kindle Unlimited, so that people can get them for free and read them. But it's I love it. And it's really so that I could ultimately, so I can sharpen my claws for when I write a novel, which is the next thing. I love writing. I love the process, but for a long time, I didn't think of myself as one until it was really probably the beginning of this year, or kind of the end of last year. I had this epiphany of like, oh no, I have 5 books. I should shut up and just say just accept it. So, yeah.
Well, so on that, now, I mean, that is actually a very recurring thing. A lot of the guests that I've had on, a lot of guests you've had on, because they're often the same people, have said that it's been like the switch over of, oh, I'm an author now. So I'm curious for you, because you write both fiction and non-fiction. Now, I had Morgan Daimler on a couple of last season, whenever it was, and they talked a great deal about kind of what the relationship is like between those two, and how they're separate. For you, what is your process when you were writing your novellas to writing, your non-fiction? What was that process like for you, like between the two?
So, like, all right, I would say when I was 20 years old, I was working for Barnes and Noble. And I had this opportunity to go then. I know, yeah, books have always been. I was an elementary school librarian, and I taught kids how to read for 3 years. Like, I don't know where I'm at with this, me just discovering I like writing. Anyway, but I was working for Barnes and Noble, and there was this famous medium that had come into town, and she was doing a show at the local UU church, the Universalist Unitarian Church, which just happened to be directly across the street from this Barnes and Noble. So they had reached out to the Barnes and Noble and said, hey, we don't want to sell her books because we don't have time for it. Do you guys want to come in and vend her books? And the woman who was in charge of events was, she was a spiritually person, and she knew I was. And so she's like, hey, do you want to go sell some books in this church? Hell yeah, let's do it. So it was really this opportunity to meet this world famous medium, again, Rosemary Altea, who was prolific in the 80s and the 90s for writing books and helping people figure out their psychic abilities. And that's my original avenue into all of this, was being a weird psychic kid and all of it. So at the end of the day, for me, it always boils, if I can go hang out with a bunch of spirits, I'm going to hang out with a bunch of spirits. I'd rather go do that than go hug a tree. So that's just me. So I was like, hell yeah. So we went, and I had this prolific experience, this very profound experience with her, while she was doing this stadium style reading, which are very difficult to do. And I saw her spirit guide. It was one of the first times of seeing anybody else's spirits. Like, I mean, he was huge and palpable. And I actually was unfamiliar with her work outside of just knowing that she was this prolific author. And I remember being in the back of the audience, and she's up on the stage, and I saw this giant gray like bird behind her, and he just kind of like covered her up. And I just remember like, this is fucking weird, like, having this moment of like, what, like, whoa. And then somebody in the audience stands up and starts asking about Gray Eagle, and Gray Eagle was her spirit guide. And so I'm like, fuck me, like, this shit's real. So I was primed to listen to what this woman was about to say to me. So at the end of the event, I am going out and I get one of the books signed. And I tell her, like, I'm wanting, this is right at the time I was written my first book, The Universal Witch, which was horrible. I'd asked her, like, I'm writing a book. Do you have any advice? And she looked at me and she said, just tell the truth. And I remember thinking, like, I took that offensively, at first, like, well, what do you, like, you don't even know me, lady, And then I thought, like, but it really was when I was sitting down to write The Witch's Book of Power, where I remembered this. It's seared into my brain. And it had come up that I could basically create something that fit what I was writing about. I could just kind of pull it out of my ass, or I could do it the hard way, which was to really sit down and that's when her words just turned into gold in my head. And I realized my job as a nonfiction writer writing about spirituality, which is fantastical enough as it is to honestly be as grounded as fucking possible, because it is so difficult for people to grasp and to digest the stuff that we're writing about. And if you are being intentionally flamboyant or fragrant or any of those things, it is going to be misleading for people. And that's when it clicked in my head, because otherwise I'm like, I'm not writing about anything that I would be lying. I don't even know, but it took years. And then it finally clicked in my head. And I went, okay. So I feel like the big difference is for me that when I get to sit down and I get to write fiction, I get to let my brain kind of go unchecked. Like I just slip into a stream. I let what comes, and sometimes it stays, sometimes it doesn't, but it gets to be, it's more like sitting down and molding clay or doing ceramics in that way. Whereas when I write nonfiction, I really think of it more like I'm kind of building a tapestry. There's a lot of weaving. There's parts that have to come together in a way that don't necessarily have to come together elsewhere. And I think, again, it's responsibility. When you're writing a fiction story, your job is to entertain, and you get to be that person. But when you're writing nonfiction, and again, you're writing about things like we're writing about, you can't do that, and because it's misleading, and it ends up, I don't want to say poisoning the waters, but it definitely creates a shallowness to the depth that we are capable of taking it, because we're being misled. So I didn't want to be that person, and that's it. So I would say that's probably the big difference. Like when I get to entertain, and it's not that I'm not putting, like, because of course I'm like slipping in occult stuff into my books that of course that's happening, but I don't have to do it in a way that can turn into a practical modality for people, where I do when I write my books on the craft. And so it's just, they're two different worlds, right? Like I get to address things that really bother me about society in my fiction books that I just couldn't do in my nonfiction. And I get to promote ideas that I don't get to promote otherwise in my nonfiction. So, I tried really hard as a fiction writer to stay in my lane, or a nonfiction writer to stay in my lane, only if so that the reader has a form that they can pour themselves into, and it's not all over the place, or just unattached. So
that makes
I'd say that it's probably my two. That's probably how I differentiate the two.
So here's the question for you: like, living with ADHD and being neurodivergent myself, I know this answer for myself, between kind of moving in between different parts of my world. when writing nonfiction and fiction, can you do it at the same time? Can you switch from one to the other? And what's that process like for you?
Yeah, I totally do. And I found it to be therapeutic as hell, because when I write nonfiction, it's especially, the two things are true too. I know that with my nonfiction, I'm going to have a whole team of editors that go through it. I know that I'm going to have feedback from people. I also know that I have an existing audience that has an expectation of what I'm going to do in each of my books. And I love my readers. I really, truly love my readers. They amaze me. They are, I mean, honestly, I could tear up about it. Like, my readers are amazing. And so I want to make sure that I have continued to fulfill my promise to my readers. With the nonfiction, or with the fiction work, I get to fulfill a promise to myself, which is to explore things that otherwise I wouldn't get a chance to. Right. So, I'd say I do flip between the two, because sometimes I get very exhausted writing for, my nonfiction stuff. It's hard to, and I was just at a conference this spring, and we were doing a publishing panel. And I remember looking at all these incredible authors who I was on this panel with, just incredible authors, prolific authors. And I'm just like looking around, and I look over at this audience of people who are all aspiring writers. And I'm like, what we do is really hard. Yeah. Like, writing about your spirituality is really difficult. It's not like writing about, like, other forms of nonfiction work are usually like how to build a house, or how to build a blah, 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 or how to garden. Like, but with us, we're writing about these very nuanced things. And it's so personal. So, like, it is the hardest thing to sit down and write about your genuine spiritual experiences and be taken seriously, like, as a person, because we all do it. We all are dismissive when we start talking about spirituality with other people, and we all have our ideas and our concepts, and people are, because of the nature of the topic, when it comes to spirituality, people are full of convictions, and they are full of, they've invested a lot in certain ideas. So when you write about your spirituality, people instantly take that as you're writing about their spirituality. And it's really, really hard, because you're writing about your spirituality, and you're inviting people to come see what you do. It's very different. And the other part of it too is that we have, in the nonfiction spiritual world, we have a history of authors and cults of personality. Not so much in the witchcraft world, because I think we're all kind of low down and dirty a little bit. We're not going to put up with that. But in the spiritual publishing world in general, there's a lot of that. Yeah. So I think we're weary of that. And in the occult, I think we're very weary of that, because we grew up kind of escaping spiritual systems where that was, in one form or another, the way it went. So we kind of reject those things. And so it's different. I feel like, for me, I am, as a nonfiction writer, as a writer of topics of witchcraft and the occult, I feel like my job is, more than anything, to make things accessible to people. And so, and I, not to toot my own horn, but that's like, when you Google me, that's one of the things that comes up, is that this is what this guy does. He's good at taking these really hard concepts and making them practical. And I'm proud of that. But I don't have to do that when I write fiction. I get to make things crazy, and I'm really happy about it. I get to go the opposite. I get to make things more occult and more nuanced. And I don't have to simplify things. Sometimes I do, but I don't have to. And I love that. I love that there's a mystery with writing fiction that doesn't necessarily exist, even though I'm writing about mysteries themselves when I'm writing nonfiction. So it's just kind of a different world, but they do different things for my soul. They feed me in a different way. And, honestly, because of the ADHD, it's not like, my problem is never not having ideas. My problem is an abundance of ideas. And it can be hard to, like, jumpstart yourself, as, like, when you sit down, like, in the morning, get your coffee, and you're sitting down to you start your writing, it can be really hard to get to that first, like, 2,000 words. Right. Once you hit the 2,000 words, there's something about it. I don't know what it is, but you hit 2,000, and then suddenly it's like, blah, 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 and it all just comes flooding out. Sometimes it's like priming an engine, right? You got to get into it. And with my ADHD, I have to click into this hyper focus kind of place to really pump out, like, massive amounts of content, which can happen. Like, I wrote in Witch's Book of Power, there's 20,000 words right in the middle, which is all the astrology stuff. And I wrote that over a weekend. I wrote 20,000 words over a weekend because I didn't have to think about it. Like, it was just
yeah,
looking at my notes,
yeah.
rewrite, look at my notes. Yeah. So it was a very different world, but I can't do that necessarily when I write, fiction. Fiction is different. And I can do long form streams of consciousness with it, but it's definitely like, I don't have the same support system as a writer with it. So I don't have a bunch of editors, and I don't have all that stuff that I know is going to be there to keep me in check otherwise.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And that's hard. So I would say that's like a difficult thing. And and that's, once I get through this, then I will I put energy into getting an agent for my fiction work. And I was getting these letters and these comments back, and I thought to myself, I'm really lucky that I'm kind of sharpening my claws on this before I go and jump in, because it's I want to do too much. Like, I want to write about too much. And so I get to do that in my fiction. I don't get to do that in my nonfiction. I know in my nonfiction, I'm going to have 15 people reading it, and they're all going to come back with a bunch of different, and that's that. So it's different, but they do different things, and they prime my brain in a different way. And so
I've heard this before. I've heard, and I've certainly used. So like, one of my therapeutic things with writing is world building. I just love world building, making maps, coming up with like fake histories, and that's therapeutic to me. Like, it's a shame that I have dyslexia, because D&D would like be amazing for me for that, right? But I do notice it's like a different part of the brain, and I have heard other people say it's almost like speaking different languages, right? You express yourselves differently through a different language in that way. So for you, what's your process then? Because I know with nonfiction, what my process looks like for me, like how I need to do this at this time, write for a few hours, then it first starts flowing. It sounds similar to you. With your fiction, then you're not stream of consciousness. What's your process?
There's in this particular series, like, that I'm working on now, the first one was pantsing. So I sat down and I just let it out, and just how it all floated, it started to flow. But then you realize at some point you've got to have a structure. Like, there has to be a path for these people to follow. And so that's when I had to put the brakes on and sit down and kind of draft this whole thing out. And for me, my interest in the occult led me to a very, in its own weird way, it led me to a very scientific place where I firmly believe the universe is a being, and that we are cells inside of that being. Like, that's how I firmly believe this. And the universe is God, goddess, whatever you want. I don't give what, it doesn't matter to me. It's you and them. That's your business.
Monster, whatever you call it, right?
Right, whatever. But I do believe we are the universe's way of discovering itself. That consciousness is very precious, and it's a gift. And we are the universe reaching out and exploring itself. So for me, the opportunity to take that, like, literally, and not just psycho-spiritually, metaphorically, but to really make that a thing, has been thrilling. It has been incredible. So the process has been, the impetus was wild and crazy and free, but then once there was this territory that was discovered, it became this thing where I realized I had an opportunity to figure some stuff out for myself, which writing helps you do a lot. Absolutely. But then the flip side of it is to present something that maybe hasn't been done before in a way, and see where that takes us. And that's really freaking cool. So I get a lot of excitement out of that kind of thing. But I'm also really my main character is she's a lesbian, and I wasn't expecting her to be a lesbian, but it happened. And so I just went with it, and I'm like, okay. And I love writing her. She's who I wish I was, like, so I really enjoy like this process, and I love the things that it's just great. And so but it's very different. And right now, I wrote the first 3 very quickly, like really quickly. And I was doing a challenge where I was like, I'm going to write a novella every month. And I did that for 3 months, and that was great. And then I had to stop. So getting back to that is interesting, but it's taking the break. I've had time to kind of really reevaluate things. And so I'm one of the assumptions that my nonfiction readers had made instantly was that I was going to be slipping some like occult stuff into it.
Right,
And I
right.
hadn't really done that. And so when I got to the end of the second book, I was like, okay, we're doing it. We're going to rip the band-aid off. We're going to do it. And so then I get to do that. And in doing that, I get to take these really lofty occult concepts and then fictionalize them and characterize them into this place. And it's been really cool. So I'm doing this as an exploration exercise as a writer, and me making it public is just so that I am putting it out there in the world and not holding on to it like I've done with my other stuff. But it's really just warming up so I can write this novel that is in the works and it's brewing and things like that. It's just me sharpening my knives. But the feedback I've gotten on it is incredible. So I'm excited. It's this world I never thought like as a fiction writer, I never thought I was going to be able to do it. Just jump in and do it the way that I'm doing it, and it's freaking cool. Yeah, it's
I have
really
like a million questions on that. I don't know which direction to go. I'm going to go this direction though. I want to know, because you talk you talk a lot about your inspirations from the non-fiction in your books. You know, all these writers that you were connecting with and reading. So for your fiction, then, who are your inspirations? Who are the people that you look to as being, I need some inspiration right now?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I have. It kind of depends. You have to get me on any day, and you'll ask, and I'll answer differently with this one.
Yeah.
So right now I'm actually been going through this process of rediscovering science fiction, the older forms of science fiction. My father was a huge sci-fi person. Like I'd visit his house and he'd have like a stack of paperbacks in his bathroom, like, because that's what dads did back then. And we didn't have phones, so we had paperback books. And but yeah, and everything was Star Trek and Farscape and anything sci-fi. Sci-Fi Channel was playing 24 hours a day. Like, it was just, that's who he was. And I didn't appreciate it because that was what my dad did. And my dad, I looked up to my dad. He was always very intelligent and very smart, but I never, it almost felt like that was dad's thing. And it wasn't my thing. And then when I got older, I discovered I really love science fiction. I love a good android cyborg story. I love when humanity is tested. I love these things. And you get to address something in sci-fi that we don't address anywhere else, which is this idea of kind of this open-ended future that we have and where things could go, and what happens when we're tested. And this is something that what I love about science fiction the most as an occultist is this idea of humanity being pushed to a brink. To a tipping point where our species is going to end if we don't get our shit together. And then what happens in those moments? Because as an occultist, I think we're all at least in some agreement that the end game is some form of like a personal ascension or spiritual ascension in some degree. And so when we get to write these stories that take things into consideration, like the technology of the future and our propensity to be assholes, not only with each other, but like what happens, like we've done all this colonizing here. What happens when somebody shows up and wants to colonize us? Things like that. So it's really trippy to me. And I'm just forever fascinated by the stories of humanity's end or the brink of what happens when we're taken to this place. And it affects me. I mean, they just do, they get me in a way that is just very haunting. And it's because I'm an occultist. It's because you get to a point as an occultist where you start to look out at the bigger picture and you start to realize, ooh, we haven't even scratched the surface. You could be an occultist, and I have a friend who is an occultist, and he is a Nobel-winning scientist, and he can't bridge those worlds together because he won't be taken seriously as a scientist. But guys like this are having this level of, like, that's fascinating to me, that you can merge those two things. So there's that bit. And I'm also, something we get in sci-fi that we don't get elsewhere is the bridging of technology and spirituality.
Very much.
And so I love that concept as well, because I look at us as we're just the universe figuring itself out, and why wouldn't technology be part of that too? So there's a lot of you can do things in science fiction that we can't do elsewhere. And because of that, I find myself forever interested in like stories like Asimov. Anything Asimov has written is fucking phenomenal. But because he takes us there, he takes us to these places. I've been on a big Asimov kick lately. I've been reading a lot of Le Guin Foundation, of course. How could you
Love
not
Foundation.
Foundation? I'm gonna reread the entire thing because I didn't read them in order, and I didn't know I hadn't, so I'm gonna go and read them in order again. But yeah, so that whole Foundation series is amazing. I'm a big fan of Le Guin. I've been really getting into Le Guin because Le Guin is covering some shit that's heavy.
Well, and what I love about Le Guin, I'm just gonna jump in because she's one of my favorites, is she really bridges fantasy and sci-fi. And people often mistake those two. There's a lot of sci-fi shows that are actually
fantasy,
right? And I love like Changing Planes by Le Guin. Like absolutely
so good. So good. I haven't, it's been a long time, but yes, it was it leaves a mark on you. Yeah, there's the Dispossessed, like there's all so good. I have really gotten into, there's an author named China, I'm gonna totally mispronounce his name, China Mieville. And he wrote a book called, what was it I just read? I'm reading right now a book called Paradiso Street Station. I cannot remember this book. Oh my god, it was amazing too. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But he's actually he's a communist, and he is over there in the UK, and he writes about. I am not a communist myself. Everyone, each their own. You live your life, but he puts these very socialistic and socialism concepts that are often handled in communism, and he puts them into his books. And it's not a pitch for communism in any way, shape, or form. He just happens to be a communist. But the stuff that he brings up is like, whoa. Yeah. Like there's this one that I just, oh my god, it's gonna drive me nuts that I can't remember what it was called.
Is it Perdido Street Station?
That's the one I'm reading now. It's just for not
the Scar.
Something Town. Embassy Town is the book. Yeah.
Embassy Town, yeah.
Embassy Town is amazing because it kind of presents this concept that like our brains constructed language for us. It did not construct language for other species, right? And so what happens when our language, like let's say there's a species that doesn't know how to lie because it's never been part of their system. Right. And their language is constructed in a way that you can't lie. You actually have to, because the way nuance and words are conveyed. So what happens when humans show up?
Right. And they're able to.
Right. And what happens when they, these aliens, they can tell that we're not being truthful, but they don't know how to respond to that. And it's this whole thing. And then you add the human stuff to it, and it just becomes this amazing. So I flew through that book in a weekend. Like I could not put it down. It was so good. And it kept putting me in this place as an occultist where I started thinking about spirits.
Yes.
And communicating with spirits, and what happens when a spirit with a certain vibration or a certain propensity for something gets involved with us, and we're pieces of crap and we're lying. What happens to the spirit? How do we change the spirit? What's our impact on the spirit? Right. So that's the kind of stuff that like just really gets me going. So I do. China Melville's is really amazing. And then the other one that I have been chewing on, I really like, if you're somebody who enjoys sci fantasy and you want something that's like quick and edible, but there's a lot of them. There's an author who I really like named Glenn Stewart. He's over on Amazon Audible. He's on Amazon and Audible, and he has a book called the Starship's Mage series, and it's about a magic being kind of reawoken in humanity through experiments and through science and splicing alien DNA essentially into us. And as a result, there's this new class of human that gets kind of created, and things happen as a result. And the stories take place far into the future after all these things have happened, and they're dealing with the after effect of having these people who were like tortured into in breeding programs and stuff to like become mages, and then you have like their descendants, and they are very scary to people because not everybody can do it, and so they kind of have to enter this contract, kind of like how the Aes Sedai enter a contract so that they're not going to hurt people and stuff in Wheel of Time. It's a kind of similar thing where they have to basically enter a life of servitude to humanity. And what happens as we're expanding, and just it's really crazy stuff, but I love it. I actually took in that series, there's this thing that the mage uses to fly the ships, because you can only do light speed through magic. So he puts his hands on this perfect exact silver replica of the ship to make it jump, basically, and they refer to it as the simulacrum. And so in my books, if you read my books, I have a simulacrum, and that's part of the way that we work with our relationship with our gods. Is instead of going and getting a deity statue, you make one. You make a simulacrum of the spirit, because no other artist is ever going to be able to create your god. That ain't going to happen, right? That is in your head. So you make it real, you make it physical by creating a simulacrum. And so that's the, so there's plenty of times where words or things will come up and it's there. I was just talking to Ivo Domingos Jr., and he's often coined as creating a term called aspecting, which is when a spirit is, it's like a very mild form of possession, kind of. And that actually came from a sci-fi book that was written in the 60s. And he and I were he's like, I didn't coin that term, I just applied it to this because it made sense. And it was, so there's a lot of that. There's especially with science fiction, there is a huge amount of like serious occultism that actually is there, because you'd be amazed at how many sci-fi writers are also occult authors. Well, there's a lot of that. So
Neil Gaiman, I mean, first one to come, right? You know?
Yeah.
But even more classical, like Frank Herbert. I mean, you look at the way that he bends spirituality and I mean, Dune is science fiction. It isn't fantasy. It has some fantasy elements, but I mean,
that's such a fine line too, because really, like, the only thing that makes science fiction different from fantasy per se is that in order for it to be sci-fi, it has to exist in our universe, like our universe, not another universe. So it has to play by the rules of our universe. So if technology can do it, then sure, it's fine. Or if it's something that can be explained away by the rules that exist in our universe now as we know it, then it's sci-fi. The minute you add psychics or you add anything that's remotely spiritual, it starts to bend into that fantasy world really easily. And so it's a fine line that we all walk in. But like, I mean, there are authors who we often talk about like stumbling into things accidentally, like Tolkien. He wasn't an occultist, but his shit is super occulty. We look at even, as much as I hate L. Ron Hubbard, I hate to say it, but like, he was an occultist, and a lot of his stuff, like, there's a lot of that stuff in there. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. But so there's a lot of that. There's just a history of it. And I was talking to, I'm going to name drop again, Michelle Boulanger, and they were saying that because they have fiction work out there too that's amazing about the fallen angels, really good stuff, and just how we can kind of slip things into our fiction like lessons. We can kind of fit into our stories that we can't do elsewhere. It's like there's certain things you can't explain
totally true
just right out. You kind of have to lead somebody through an experience, and so fiction allows us to do that, and that's been really cool. And there's a bunch. I'm blanking on name. I could list. There's like 5 different occult authors right now who all have fiction books out.
I was gonna say, this is the thing. And this is what I've had a couple of them on the show actually. Madame Pamita, Brandon Weston, Chris Allen, right? Yeah. And it's interesting. And I will say this, and I'm not going to edit this out. It is interesting that the use of frame tale like that, it goes back a very long time in Dion Fortune, folklore. That's the practice of folk tale right there, right? But it's interesting that it comes in waves. Talking about waves, I think we talked about this maybe off camera. Yeah. We were talking about the wave of these waves come up every like 25, 30 years, because you go back to the 70s, 80s, right? And look at the like Libernal. Was Libernal? No, Libernal wasn't a frame tale. But there were there were tales then that encapsulated it, right? And I feel like that ties in with that brain mechanics. So something about the connection with story and brain mechanics that people are really latch on. This is why mythology exists. It's not just silly stories, right? So it's interesting that current crop of occult writers all differently, all separately are coming up with like discovering frame tales again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have to ask, Darren Sparks, that's your name. How did you come up with Darren Sparks? I'm always interested.
Oh, it was so hard. Oh, it was so hard. So if I could get away with just Devin Hunter, I would. But I can't, because there's actually a fiction author named Devin Hunter who started putting books out a couple years ago, and she is a very sweet woman, from what I understand. She won't respond to my emails because I get her fan mail, and she writes like little kids books that are licensed by the it's a game that kids play. I can't remember. Fortnite. It's Fortnite. So she writes these Fortnite books that are like, that take place in the Fortnite universe, and they get sold at Scholastic book fairs. And so I get her fan mail like all the time. And I'm like, oh, poor kid. Like, did you not, like, Devin at modernwitch.com. This is not this person. But so I will, and I'm, you know, I just forward her fan mail to her because I want that too, you know, but she's never responded to me or anything. And I have no, whatever. She just probably doesn't want to talk to the weird witch guy. But so she exists. And so I couldn't put a book out. My other thing was that I had one of my first reviews for Witch's Book of Power, which is my first book, was that it was like 1 star. I thought I was getting a fiction book. And so my thing became really like, you know, I guess my titles like Witch's Book of Power, Witch's Book of Spirits, those could be considered fiction. Like I could see that. So I kind of went through this moment where I was like, no. I need to make a clear, definite, like clear partition there, so that my readers who read Devin Hunter know what they're getting, right? And that I can also cultivate another audience. Because another thing that's happening right now is a separate audience. Another thing that's happening right now is you get niche, like YouTube, Facebook, they niche you very, very, very tightly. And you get to a point where you can't grow an audience outside of what you've already done. So adding, like, if I were to start talking about, which is what I had originally wanted to do, was to start a show that was just talking about fiction books and how they relate to occultism, I realized, like, I can't really do that on Modern Witch because there's not going to be a response to it. When I did this amazing interview with Alice Krieger, she was the Borg Queen.
Oh yes, I listened to that.
She did the Witch. Yeah, she was in a movie called She Will.
You were gushing all over.
She's fucking royalty. She's like sci-fi royalty. Like it was just amazing. I was like, I'm talking about, my dad would have shit himself. Like, it's just amazing. So, but I did this great interview and nobody has seen it. Like, I put it up, and it was because of the way that I did the setup for it. So I think like 300 people have seen this fucking interview, and it is one of the best interviews I've ever done. And the setup for it is talking about witches and horror movies, and like, and it was good. The production values were like super high because I was going for a very specific thing, and my ADHD refuses to allow me to put something out into the public that isn't like really pretty. So like it laborious. Oh, this was a hard interview. Nobody saw it. And it's because of the setup for it. So it's just really hard to have an audience and create that. And it's not the audience's fault. It's the system. It's like the algorithm. There's stuff.
It's an issue. No, I hear you. Yeah.
So, you know, I realize I'm just gonna put it up on my Modern Witch and just be done with it. But because I want people to hear the interview. It's a really good interview.
It's a really good interview. It's really sweet.
And it's Alice Krieger. It's Alice fucking Krieger. But yeah, so you know, it just sucks. And there's opportunities that I was on ABC on To Tell the Truth, a show called To Tell the Truth, and that was incredible. And that I got this really big burst of attention from on social media from that for a minute, and then it went away. And it was like the tank after that was so hard, like just the tanking, that when the energy wasn't there anymore, that it took a long time to get like any attention again. It was just really weird. The whole system is social media is confusing.
No, it's not,
and I'm not always here for it. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
so Darren Sparks, where did that come from?
Duh, yeah. Hello, brain fart. So I was having a hard time with it, and okay, so 2 things are true. The name that I am often called that is not my name is Darren. So is Devin Hunter here? Like I will show up at an event and my name tag will say Devin Hunter. Like it's just Darren is the thing. And it's also kind of funny because if you watched Bewitched as a kid, then there was always this, Darren, like it was this, thing. So it's just kind of funny for me in that way. So that's where Darren stuck. David Salisbury and I are, he either gets called Devin and I get called David, or it's back and forth, or it's Darren. Yeah. So either people call me David or Darren. And I'm almost, it's funny, but yeah, so that just kind of stuck. And then Sparks, That's pure magic. That was a pure magical choice. That was me sitting down and saying, what is the energy that I want to bring into this? And I wanted a spark. So I wanted that ignition. And so Darren Sparks. That's how that's going to be. Yeah.
I'm always curious because it's like, you know, the names, like where do they come from? I've sat and thought for myself, like if I ever decide to do nonfiction, if I ever decide to do fiction, like what would my nom de plume be? And I'm like, I don't know. It's very intimate. So who is Darren Sparks versus Devin Hunter as a writer?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm thinking about this a lot lately. I have been fortunate enough to have made some really great friends in the sci-fi community and other authors and people. And being able to hear their experience and their stuff has been really, really enlightening for me. And I feel like there isn't a whole, the big difference is with Devin Hunter's work, when I'm Devin Hunter, which is my real name, but when I'm being Devin Hunter, that is specifically, there's a weight to it that I don't have with Darren. And I need to be able to get away from that heaviness sometimes. Part of being a spiritual person in general is just, we're just kind of sensitive folks. But when you take on any sort of role in somebody's life where you're their mentor or their spiritual counselor, their advisor, you end up becoming very involved in whatever's going on in their lives, one way or another, like just energetically at least. And that's draining. And I let it get to me in the past, big time, and I let myself get drained. And I'm sure I said some stupid shit online at some point or whatever. And that just is that I don't want to be that, And so with Devin Hunter, I try really hard, especially nowadays, to be the person I wanted to see, the person that I wish I had, or the person I wish I had in my life as an author, as somebody who I'm following, things like that. And I try to take that a little bit more seriously these days than I did, especially through the pandemic. I think I was just going fucking crazy. And so, but with Darren Sparks, I get to be that little boy who's just really into sci-fi. Like right now I'm in this process of we're like developing this show for YouTube that's me and another sci-fi author, and we're just going to talk about sci-fi and like how fun that's going to be. But like what's my shtick with it? Well, my shtick with it actually is I'm an occultist. Right? So, and I'm a very spiritual person. So I'm very interested in these spiritual things that sci-fi talks about. Nobody's really doing a whole lot of that. So I get to do that. And that's going to be this really fun thing. Whereas my partner is not. He's very, he's actually knew me as Devin Hunter, which is really trippy to me. He's actually a fan that is this really great author. And we met and I actually reviewed his book. And then he was like, "Oh my God, you're Devin Hunter." And I was like, "Yes." Really fucking cool. So we just had this friendship that struck up, and he's this amazing author. And we both have this love for Farscape, the television show.
Farscape.
Particularly Ben Browder's ass, which is perfect, and leather pants all the time.
Oh,
so like
he was wearing,
yes, it's a little, he's just he's yummy. So we're gonna do that. So I get to do that. I get to play with that part of myself that I just have never really. I've been so serious, and spirituality is so serious. I just posted yesterday to be like, make spirituality fun again, and that was because every time I feel like I get some sort of brevity, I look and there's somebody going through like intense shadow work and their life is falling apart and it's shit. And I'm like, can't we just sing? Can't we just like have a moment of like peace and light? And like, just why is it always so dark? And we're always so in this place of just ripping ourselves apart and feeling like crap. Like that isn't spirituality, friends. Like that's just torture, So I get there this thing where I'm like, no, I need more. I need it to be chill. I need things not to be so intense that it feels like life or death, and all of that. And I get to do that with sci-fi. So part of it is just very much that, I think, more than anything, that Darren gets to have more fun. But Devin gets to have fun in a very different way. Devin gets to talk to spirits and help people talk to spirits, and help people realize that the experience they're looking for is probably a lot more subtle than they think. And you can heal yourself through witchcraft. You can do a lot of great things, and that's Devin's very involved in that, but Darren doesn't have to be. And I like that. Darren gets to be the weird nerd, and I like that a lot. Yeah,
I love that. I really love that, because it's so true. People can take this very, very seriously, and I think that maybe it's a developmental phase where they're at. But I think if we start treating it more like we need to have fun. I think that's changing it, right?
Yeah.
I think
I
you
think
should
it's
have, sorry, go on.
Oh no. I was just gonna say,
Well,
I think that's why a lot of people leave is
yeah.
there's no long-term sustenance there, right? Like if it's all just shadow work all the time,
Yeah.
why would anybody want to stay?
Well,
Like, let's be
like
real.
that's the thing. It's like over here, or if there's no balance. It's either really, really wooey, blah, or really super serious. We can't do anything. We have to do this. It's
Right.
Find the balance.
And the two sides don't like each other. And I don't get it because I'm like stuck in the middle. I feel like I'm the guy that's like stuck in the middle of those two worlds all the time. And I'm just like, y'all are doing the same thing. You're just not, you're just using very different words and you're just getting angry at each other for it. And it's fascinating. But yeah.
Oh, that's good. I was going to say, I think that there's an opportunity to bridge the gap with this new project. You should have Virginia Hay come onto your show, do interviews with Virginia Hay, because Virginia is over in England right now. She's selling soap in the middle of like Cornwall, somewhere like that, and apparently she's really, really open to having interviews, but she's really, really super spiritual too. Reach out. I think that'll be really cool.
I'll put her name on my list. Check it out. Yeah,
I'll send it to you afterwards. I'll send you her website, but because I was thinking of reaching out to her anyways for other things. But anyways, that's a whole other idea. I had another question for you. I can't think, it was completely gone. This collaboration piece. So moving into a collaboration piece. So I'm really, really excited that you're putting out with us. You also have Getting Stoned with Nicholas and Devin too. What is it like for you to collaborate in podcasting, particularly because you've been podcasting by yourself for such a long time? What's that like? What's working with Nicholas like?
I love collabing. So I love working with groups. I love working with people. I had a friend of mine who I had done a big project with, and it did not go well. And one of her criticisms was that I don't work well with others, and that really bothered me because I'm like, wait a minute, I have 3 partners that like we've been together for like 14 years. I lead these, I teach these huge like ensembles. I had a shop where we had 5 employees that I work really well with others, and I actually work better with others. I find because part of the ADHD is that there's so many ideas, it can be really hard to actualize something.
Why is it right?
And so I find having a partner to just discuss things with and then really kind of take out the tangible and that is so important, and especially to like having a good process. So like I'm the author who, I know it's really weird because nobody does this. I love getting my edits back. Like the first time I was miserable, I was like horrified, but I had heard all these horror stories. Like I remember Dorothy Morrison talking about how she like brought out a bottle of whiskey or something, and every time she read something, she'd take a shot. And I was like, oh my God, like this sounds horrible. Like I was so nervous about it. And then I started getting it, and I think there's a level of some people just trying to make, prove that they need a job kind of a thing. I think there's some shit like that, but most of it's really constructive, and it's really like kind of amazing. Like so I really love having a group of people to work with, and I love having a creative partner. And Nicholas and I have been friends for many, many moons. And he was one of the first authors that I got to meet out when I started touring, like as Devin Hunter. Yeah. And so we met each other at a sales conference, and we were both there pitching our books and stuff. And I just fell in love with this guy because he's just the sweetest little.
He's so like cute. He's wonderful.
He's literally what you see. Like what you see is what you get with Nicholas. Like that's just like with Matt. What you see is what you get. And I just adore him. And we're both big music nerds. We're both big band nerds, when we were kids. So we have this. Like he plays the French horn, and he's in an orchestra, and he'll like send me videos, and I'm like the nerd who gets it. Like I understand this weird French horn that it has like no valves. Like I understand why that's so cool. Like so like we're that for each other, where like we just have a very similar background and we nerd out over very similar things. And so we get along really well. He is way smarter than me though, and so like he just is. He's Nicholas is like a walking encyclopedia, especially when it comes to minerals and gemstones. Yeah. And it's because this is what he studied. Like he went to school for these things. He is way more hip on stuff than I am. And I love stones, but I'm coming at it from the perspective of I owned a crystal shop. I sold these things for years. I have that relationship to them, which he works at a crystal shop too, but he's just has a different relationship. So we have this kind of thing where I'll have like this weird, crazy metaphysical hit on something, and then I'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And he'll be like, actually, that's because this thing is inside of the stone. And it does, blah, blah, blah. So he totally like, so there's this, it's cool. Like we confirm each other. It's really neat. So we just work really well together, and there will at one point be a project that we do together. Like that's without question. Just because we love each other a lot. He's just such a good human being. Like he really truly is. And I am just so here for sweet people who are genuinely good human people. Like I'm so here for it. And because there's so much that's not out there. And so when you see the good people, you hold on to them and you take care of them.
Like a good mechanic, right?
Yes, exactly. So like Nicholas is one of the people I'm like, no, we will protect him at all costs. Like you leave Nicholas alone. And so he's just a sweetie, and he's really creative, and he's very intelligent. And he's also like, I did not study writing. I did not study the English language. I am going to be completely honest with you. I didn't understand the difference between an adjective and a verb until probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, because I'm from rural Ohio. Like I have a rural Ohio public education. Like do not expect good things from me in that way. So I am that guy. He is not. He is incredibly intelligent. He is very learned when it comes to, he had a, basically a private education, and so he didn't go to public school, and so he very different, very different. And I love it. Like we're in our, like yesterday we did a show, and the other day, and there was something we were talking about petrify or
Amber.
Jet, Amber and Jet, and we were talking about like I said, oh well, Jet's like essentially petrified burnt trees, right? And he was like, no. And I let, like, he's one of the only people who I allow to correct me, or I even go up to him like, please correct me. Like like he's that guy. So I love that. I love that we have that relationship where he feels safe enough to like come to me and be like, hey, or I can go to him and say, hey, can you, and the flip side of it is I can do the same thing for him. And we both have that. And it's just beautiful. So he's a really great person. The Getting Stoned was something that I started doing, the show Getting Stoned, which is, we talk about crystals. I started doing when I had my shop, and then the pandemic happened, and and one thing I'm good at is I'm good at names. Like I'm good at punny names. So Getting Stoned is one of horticulture, right? I'm good with these weird like dad joke kind of names. And so Getting Stoned was one that I'm like, oh no, I really love this. I want to keep it. And his publisher, the one that he's with currently, is very into that. They're very new agey and stuff. So he was like, oh, this will fit. So it's good. It's really fun. And I would prefer to do something like that with a partner, where it's, because what I've learned after all these years of podcasting is no one wants to listen to one person talk. No one wants it, unless I'm listening to the news, like unless it's NPR, I am not interested in listening to one person talk. So when I do my podcast, I was pretty much instantly, I was right into the interviews, which was something that people weren't doing a lot of at the time when I started podcasting. It was mostly just people sitting down with a friend or by themselves and just kind of like regurgitating. And in the world of witchcraft, it was mostly like Witchcraft 101 podcasts, where it was all just, I'm going to teach you how to be a witch over and over and over again. And so at the time, there was a podcast called Eat My Pagan Ass.
I remember
which
that.
was so funny. I would listen to it on the way into work, and I would just be crying, laughing so hard sometimes. The guy, his name was Lucky Bruja or something was his name. He was a New Yorker, and he had his fag hag friend who loved being a fag hag, and she was this like kind of foul-mouthed New Yorker, and the two of them together talking about witchcraft and tarot cards was just the funniest thing. And so I was like, no, I want to do this. Like I really want to do this. So I started Modern Witch, but I knew really quickly that I just had to do interviews, and I was lucky enough that I'd been on tour a couple of years, and I'd met some authors and people who I knew would sit down and talk to me on record. And that's how it all started. So when I got this opportunity to do something that wasn't Modern Witch, as much as I love it, Modern Witch is primarily an interview show where I just interview people, and I try to do different types of. I try really hard. You're good at this too.
Thank you.
not answering not asking the same fucking question that everyone else is asking. Like, I do not care. So I'm much more like, somebody comes on my show, I'd rather talk to them about, well, kind of like we're doing now, where it's like, let's talk about your life, or let's talk about an aspect of the craft and just your thoughts on it, versus selling a book, because
it becomes too much, right? I'll
it's
be honest though, I paid attention. Choe Ku was somebody I really focused on, because I love her interviewing style.
Very smart.
Really connecting with people. And because I mean, we can have the same questions over and over and over again, and then what differentiates? Because all the same people go on to all the same podcasts, and it's like, give me something different, right?
Yeah. And it's hard too, because I mean, obviously, in some instances we're getting books and things from editor or from publishing houses, and they're asking to promote a book. And so that's why somebody comes on the show. Right. But then there are times when it's just so much, where it's like, obviously one author has done a really good job at contacting a bunch of shows and doing, because we don't get invites. Like, it's not as for as many pagan podcasts as there are out there right now, which again, this is different from what it was when I started. But as for many of them out there, it does tend to be that there's the same group of people, or it's the same thing over and over again. And they do not like to cross pollinate, which is something that's weird. So it's weird for me, because every single time I've collabed with another podcaster or another artist, the result is like massive. Like, it's always a really wonderful, positive thing. But no one wants to do it, because everybody is so invested, right, in their idea and in their concept of spirituality, that they do not want to have other people come in and challenge that. And that's ultimately what it boils down to. And so it's just so hard. So I've learned that collabing is always like, I've made a promise to myself that this year I was going to go out and I'm going to look for artists to collaborate with specifically for this, because I get so much out of the experience. But also, like, don't you love when two people you follow get together and they do something cool? Like, isn't that awesome?
It's true. You get really excited about it. Yeah.
So I love that. I love seeing that in my own life. And so why not try to do that myself? So it's that kind of thing where I love collabing. I love working with Nicholas. I love the idea. Anytime I get to collab with somebody, I want to collab. And that's why I do the events. Like, the events that I put on, like Witches Sabbath and Horticulture, we do profit sharing. So like, I'm not paying them out. Like, you get $400, which actually most of the time, by the way, when you take online classes at these events, most of the time the teachers get paid $25 if they get paid at all. Just so you know, we don't do that. We literally divide things by percentages on ticket sales and divide it equally. So
that's so much fair. That's so fair.
It's way better, right? It's like way better. Yeah. So like, even with my events, like when I'm doing these things, it's really a collaboration with other occult teachers to get together to provide a set of lessons or whatever that is accessible to as wide of an audience as we possibly can. Because you end up, your audience gets to meet new people. That's amazing. You get to meet new people. That's amazing. But more importantly, we get to come together and do the work. And that's fucking cool. So like, when I do my events, that's the goal. The goal is to, we split the money equally. We go through and make sure that, things are there. Everybody knows, like, you put in this much work, you're going to get this percentage, you do this, you're going to get this, and it's all up in the, and then I give them the numbers at the end of the event. So there's no questions. I break it down. Here's your percentage. You get paid out that day. Like, I am all about collaborating and all about working with other people to create something big and amazing, especially in a world where it's all about the opposite. It's all about speciation, and it's all about, closing yourself off and creating niches. And people think that that's how to keep yourself safe. Well, that's not actually how to keep yourself. That's how to keep yourself isolated, and it's how to keep yourself kind of looking like an asshole, to be honest with you. Like, that's like a thing, like, So
I'm trying to hold my tongue on something, but I have noticed that there seems to be a trend where MLM style events are starting to seep in, and I'm not a fan of that. I feel like collaboration, it's about building community in a more authentic way than community is often talked about in this. Right.
And it's difficult to do, especially, online, it's difficult to do, but it's it's so, we just this is like one of those conversations that's never ending, because we're always in this place of trying to build bridges, right? And then watching bridges burn at the same time, and going through this process of like, well, who are we as a group of people? And my partner Chaz has this amazing kind of concept, which is that we're not really in a community, we're in a scene. And just like a music scene, like you've got your people who are, everyone's arguing over who the best band is, everyone argues who the best author is, right? Everyone who the best style is in the genre. It's same thing here. It's like, well, what's flavor of witchcraft is that? It's the same kind of concept, and you get like the keyboard warriors in the same kind of way, like the comments that people make about like to invalidate something are like amazing to me. Like I will sit down and just go through Facebook posts and just read the things that people comment on, but like anybody's work. Like it's not even mine. Like, I don't care, but like anybody's work, and it's just amazing that people are so cool. Like they look for absurd reasons to be dismissive, just to be flippant, or just to secure their investment in what their idea is. No one's willing to like relearn, re-educate, challenge them. Like that just isn't a thing. So I am over it. Like, and I have been over it, and I am just not here for it. And that is not who I am. And it took a long time, but eventually I'm lucky in that my audience sifted itself out. Like a lot of the people who were into that, they're not around anymore. I don't have to worry about them. My listeners and my readers they're like me. Like we all have found each other, like after the initial blah 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 of being a witch, and after all that's gone, right? And you're like, I gotta pay my bills, and I gotta keep this going, and I gotta stay interested, and I gotta stay spiritual. Like that's my audience. My audience are real people who are real witches, who are real practitioners, and that took a long time to find. Like my audience is primarily people who have been practicing for longer than 5 years. Like I don't get a lot of, like, I love new people, come.
Oh, totally,
but it's not I don't create content to spoon feed to newbies. Like that's not my thing. I am not, I will burn, like, the scene in Indiana Jones where they find the Ark finally, and he opens it up, and the Nazis just melt. Every time I'm forced to like make content for newbies, I'm that guy just melting. Like I'm like, because it's everywhere. Like we don't need Devin Hunter's opinion on Moonwater. Like you don't need it. So it's just shit like that. And so I am not here for it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, that's not what I need. That's not what I need to be creating. And that is not, again, I have this, I firmly believe we as authors make a promise to our readers, and as podcasters, we make promises. And so I have to fulfill my promise, or else I have effectively lied to my audience. Right. So if I go and it's so hard because I've fallen into the traps, right? I've fallen into I'm going to get upset. I'm going to not good for anybody. It is not good for anybody. And the flip side of it too is that it is such an energy drain. I can't even begin to tell you how much wasted time and opportunity there's been because this kind of shit's going on. So it's not magical. It's not where it's at. It's actually just stupid. It's stupid in the sense that it's a waste of energy. It's a waste of intention. It's a waste of everything. And if you are somebody who believes in potential and your potential as a human being, why would you subject yourself continuously to an environment that is destructive in the way that our online scene tends to be? So once I started seeing it as a scene, it made it a lot easier. And it's not a bad, that is not a bad thing. I think that what that actually means is that we're a lot bigger than we think we are. And that's why there's all this diversity. And it used to not be like that. When you and I were in our 20s, it was different. It was different. It was because there weren't as many people. And if there were, they weren't as active, like in a social media situation. Now it's different. And so, we're all at this point where we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Like
comes into it too, Devin. I'll be honest. I'm looking around. I'm seeing a lot of right. I'm noticing though that it seems to be like there's a crop of writers. We all seem to have been around for 20 years. We all seem to have beards. We all seem, well, I would say that generally, but we all seem to be similar phase in our lives, right? And we're all kind of cluing into the same thing. I think that developmental. I'm a big fan of an real connector with Saturn return. Like as soon as Saturn return happened for me, I was actually stepping into adulthood, right?
Yeah, that's how it felt. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for you too. Yeah,
without question.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And that's like Laura Tempest Sackroff.
I love
her, and I had a conversation. She's amazing. Her and I had a conversation many, many years ago about the need to create events for the younger people, basically, because everything that we had been growing, like her and I both, we were doing different areas and different, but we were all like, her and I were both in the touring world, going to conferences and teaching and shit at a really young age.
Mm.
And going, like, I mean, in comparison, like I was teaching at conferences when I was 18.
Right.
So insane. Like I look back on it, I'm like, what was that? But the talent pool was shallow at the time. So
Yes.
like, you know, like I'm gonna go for the 18, it's fine. But like going and doing these events, but then just realizing that like they're all made by older people because
Yes.
that's who was doing it.
Yep.
Great. There's nothing wrong with any of this. This is not a complaint,
Mhm.
right? It is just the way of things that all these events were made by older people because they had the means, the experience, the stuff to do it.
Mhm.
And at some point, the world changed, but pagan events didn't.
Mhm.
And they became less inviting for people of millennial and Gen Z and
Absolutely.
and that just is the truth. Like it just
Yeah.
is what it is. So we have this, we're seeing like communities getting smaller in a lot of ways because there's not the new blood coming in because
Yeah.
the new blood doesn't know how to find them because those groups aren't as active online and things like that as they probably could be, you know, to maintain that level of awareness about them. And you know, also there's all of these options. There's all of these things that get in the way,
And
right?
online too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
interesting to see that. So in lieu of me moving over to the UK in 9 months' time, whenever it is, right? Really heavily connecting in with the community over there, but online. And a common complaint over there is like pagan pub moots, which is a huge, big part of the pagan culture over there. Like you would go and you would have your local pagan pub moot, the Pagan Federation, which is the UK's like big organizer. They're really invested in pagan pub moots. They're actually dying because the crowds are aging out. They're not as comfortable going to a pub in their 40s as they were in their 20s, right?
Yep.
And younger crowds aren't interested. So there's I'm sure somebody's doing some sort of study on it. But when you look at how they're talking about it, it's the same way that like Christian communities are dying, like churches are the aging population and so on and so on. And it's interesting. It's interesting. But that's life. That's how the internet is taken by storm, right?
That's evolution.
It's evolution. Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a different world. It just is.
On that note, though, I have kept you long enough. I really appreciate
I'm having a blast.
I love
this. Is fun.
It was so much.
This is
It was so good to have you on too, because I know like our schedules were conflicting and things like all the. So I'm glad that we were able to peg down time. This was good.
I thank you for rescheduling 5 times or whatever. How many times it did? I appreciate it. Yeah, because I was not easy to land and pin down, and no, this was a blast.
You have been busy with projects.
That
right?
is certainly true. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But I know I also want to say congratulations on creating an actual good podcast. Like there's quality in the content, and that is not the way it always is. So for what it means for me and my experience looking at what you're doing, it's very impressive. And I hope that you understand that and that you feel that way and that you are proud of what you're creating here, because this is really fucking cool.
I really am. But I'll be honest, like when you said before, going into interviews with your podcast, I feel the same. Like if I were to do a podcast where I was just talking, I don't have the charisma, first of all. I have the connection, but I don't have the charisma. And that's not putting myself down. But I mean, nobody's going to want to listen to me talk for like 40 minutes, an hour. And I've done it before. I have a vlog online somewhere where I've just gone on and on. But I am proud. This is one of the best things that I've done apart from my book. And it's all the guests coming on. Like Laura is coming on in my next season. I've got Mortellus coming on. I've collected your household pretty much, right? So, it's good. But I love it. And I love that sense of community that comes out. What makes a difference for me, and when you said off camera previously, it's about making a difference. I really appreciated that piece, because the comments that I get, like I had a woman reach out, a guy reach out to me the other day, and he said, yours is my favorite podcast now because I can just sit and listen to all of my favorite authors, but they're not having the same conversation. And I'm like, yeah, I really hear that. I hear what he's saying with that. That's not putting down other podcasts.
No, it's just, yeah, because there's a difference between using the standard model, which is like very AP, back and forth, and then there's the creating an environment and inviting people to come in and partake in your environment. And that's that's what I try to do. That's what you are doing very successfully here. And it makes it so, because people like, really what I've learned and all of my people like to eavesdrop. That's really what they love, eavesdropping. And so podcasting is essentially that. And if you, in a good podcast, will just pick right up and the conversation will just start, and you will feel as though you have stumbled upon a conversation in a grocery store, and you're just, it's too good to walk away from. And you're just looking at your salad dressing and trying not to leave because this conversation is very good.
Yeah.
That's what we're going. Like, that's, if you want a good podcast, that's what you want to do. You want to have that eavesdropping. Oh, I shouldn't, but I'm allowed. It's like a weird little audio kink kind of a thing, but it's true. And it's this thing that we need. So the interviews, if you're going to do like just a flat out interview, your interviews should only be 10-15 minutes long. They should not, they should get to the important stuff, because everything else is small talk. Everybody hates small talk. You hate it. I hate it. The guests hate it. The listeners hate it. Like, small talk is horrible. But if you're able to have a conversation and then invite people into that space, it's monumental, and it's something that, and that's so important,
and have fun with
that's so important. Yeah.
Two of
so
my
you're doing a really good job.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just again saying that you're doing a good job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Honestly, I'm thankful for that. But it really comes from watching what other people are doing too. Like, that piece around fun is something that took me a while to get on. So looking at some of my previous, and it's an evolution. I'm sure you look at your previous episodes and you're like, ooh,
I took the first episode down.
Really?
Yes, you cannot find it. I mean, I'm sure somebody has it somewhere, but I don't even have a copy of it anymore. Because it started off, it was really bad audio quality. First of all, I was using a really shitty RCA microphone in my bathroom, because it was the one room I could shut off from the rest of the house and make quiet. And at the time, the Tea Party movement was a big thing here in the US. And the show literally starts off. So you hear my intro, which is way louder than everything else. And then you hear me come on in a very crackly microphone saying, "Screw you, Tea Party." That was the first episode of Modern Witch, was starting off with this really cool like drum intro that was too loud. And then me coming on, "Screw you, Tea Party." And then talking about religious, like blah, blah, blah. And it was a fucking horrible. And I deleted it on accident, trying to get another like a following episode up, and I had run out of space on my thing, and I thought I was archiving something, and I deleted it. And I remember like a year later going, "Where is that episode at?" And then thinking to myself, actually, no, we're just gonna leave it.
Yeah, it was bad.
No one needs that. It was bad. It was really bad. So yeah. I mean, like, when I started podcasting, it was literally you could not get a professional microphone. Like, they were so expensive. Like, really expensive, the microphone I'm on now, I think it was maybe like $150, maybe $200 at the time. When I started podcasting, this microphone would have cost me over $1,000. So that was not happening. Right. And there was no Patreon. There was none of this existed. So it was literally like I took what little bit of extra cash I had. I went to the RCA store. I bought a little handheld microphone, really dinky thing. And I did my first podcasts on that. And I edited it on free software. And it was all a process. And now I refuse. Now I'm like, no. If the audio sounds like crap, I'm not even going to listen to the show. And I know other people are like that too. Like, I love my Bailey Sarian on YouTube. I love her. I love true crime. I love that she talks about this. I love her doing her makeup. I'm here for it. But she released a series of videos that she had recorded, and the audio quality is just, and I won't even do it. I'm like, I love you, Bailey, but I can't do it. So I know now that like the quality, people have expectations that didn't exist when I started, and I've tried really hard to make sure that I'm following up with that. But it's to the point where I'm like, I won't even. Like, I've recorded episodes that you will never hear because the audio quality isn't as good as it should be. And I have to tell the author, I'm so sorry, like, but this sucks. So we can either redo it or we can but I just won't do it. Whereas before I'd be like, put it up, I don't care. Yeah. And now I really care. So like that kind of stuff, I've become a lot more anal's the wrong word, but it's all the thing that comes to mind about things
assuming,
like, right? Yeah. I've become really, even the people who come on my show, I've become really careful about, because that has in the past, people were using my platform for shit that I did not know they were using it for. And
Mm.
I've had to go through and it's been a problem. And so now I'm just really careful. Like everyone's like, oh, I want to be on your show. I'm sure you do want to be on my show, but you don't get on my show until I invite you on my show. And how do you get invited on my show? You actually do things. You actually show up. You're a good person online. You're engaging other people. You're not involved in flame wars and things like that. I don't want you on my show if you are a drama llama. I do not want it. And the reason being is that in 4 years from now, you're going to say something horrible and racist, and I'm going to have to go back and apologize to my audience who I sent to you.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that again. Like, I'm not, like, that has happened. So I'm not, so people, I get why, I understand why podcasters don't invite other podcasts. Like, I get the weirdness there. I try to be as collaborative as I can with other podcasters because I know that it's good, but I'm also really particular about who comes on my show. And I would love to have every pagan author ever. I would love that. When I have been as open as possible, I get lesser quality interviews and they're not as fun and they're not as enriching. And I also end up with these problems where so-and-so turns out to be a racist, or so-and-so is actually mentally very mentally ill,
stable,
right?
absolutely.
And not stable. And
Yeah.
all that's happened before. Like I hear the weirdest rumors and shit. I mean, we all do, right? We hear our weird rumors about us. And people have like this assumption about me that I'm a kind of gatekeepy and stuff. And I'm like, no, I just don't know you. I don't know you. I don't want you to, I'm not going to do this with you. Like, I'm not trying to be an asshole. I just don't know you. And when I go looking to see who you are and I see drama llama, I don't want that. I don't even want it near me, let alone like, because it's bad vibes. I don't want it, So it's just, it's hard. So like promoting the right people has become a really difficult thing, and just finding the right people. And so I do tend to have the same like 10 or 12 people kind of rotate in and out a lot. And I'm okay with that. Like, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I still get as many interviews as I possibly can and get new people on and things like that's still a thing. But you will see Courtney Weber a couple times on my show. You will see Jason Miller a couple times. You're going to see Christopher Penta. These are solid occultists who have solid practices that produce.
Right.
That's it. So I'm more interested in hearing what your thoughts are than I am about the person who's been a witch for a year and did that. Like that's a thing. So
we hear so many times some of those who are just coming out, and suddenly it comes out they're in that seat and their publisher pulls, right? Or that they are using AI, or that they're using it, or that they are,
or that they're diddling kids, like shit like that.
Right.
Like it's just it's really, so unfortunately we're in this place, right? And I'm going to try really hard to get more interviews. Time's a thing, like, as you know, like, right, my schedule's crazy, but it's just the discernment level you really got to amp up these days. And because before there weren't a lot of people talking about it publicly, there weren't a lot of authors, and so the pool of talent was limited, right? And now there's all these people, and
well, I mean, 200 a year. If we were to factor in some of the smaller ones, 300, right?
Yeah.
300 books coming out a year. Yeah, and Llewellyn, our publisher, and I love Llewellyn, don't take me wrong.
But it's a lot.
150 a year, and most of those are new people. There's no way of vetting them all, right?
No, and there's no way that. I mean, not
like,
to be a dick, but some authors also write about topics that I have absolutely no interest in, or I will get a copy of the book and I'll be like, this is a Google search. And I don't want that. Like, I don't want a Google search, and I don't want something that looks like it's written by AI, which is another thing that's come up a lot. So there's this like, oof. So you just don't know. So like, you got to be discerning, and you gotta really think about, like, in my case, like I had a person come on my show multiple times. I loved her. I was really good friends with her, and I thought I knew her. And then it turns out she was abusing people in her group, and the FBI got involved. Like, it was bad, like culty shit. And it blew my mind away that I had spent, I think she was on like 10 episodes in one form or another in the earlier years. And I was like, no, fuck this. Like, this isn't okay. Now I have to go back through and edit all this out. Now I have to go back through and apologize to my audience, because I am responsible enough to know that you took my advice and it took you to this place. That's not okay. So it's a lot. It's a very weird thing. And it's just weird. But the flip side of this is having standards got me picked up by the AV Club, which was a really big deal. Now they're not as big as they used to be, but they were a really big deal when that happened. I was one of the only shows in the spiritual world that they were talking about, which was
amazing.
fucking cool. And then there was and then Cosmo magazine was a big deal, and that was again just somebody going through listening to a bunch of podcasts and picked out mine as one of their top, and it was up there with Teresa Reed and like crazy. It was like what, like amazing. So having standards does pay off in the fact that you will be seen as somebody who cares about quality. Absolutely. And people care about quality. So that is something that I will say, like at the end of the day, like I like me going on ABC. That's totally because I had a podcast somebody was able to listen to and go, this guy's not crazy. Let's bring him on. Right. So like, there's just this, you gotta think of it like that. Like the end result is like, no, I'm not producing as consistently as I would love to these days. And I'm not putting out, although I'm about to drop like 12 episodes. It's gonna be a whole thing. I'm not as consistent and things like that. But the flip side of it is my shows are really good quality. Like I really care about the way it sounds, and I care about your experience. And I make these audio hyper sigils at the beginning of every episode. So you listen and you're like, what is this weird techno thing going on? And then it's just trippy shit. Like I really care about the what comes out. And I really care about the spiritual experience people have when they listen to my show. There's just things like that. And I think that at the end of the day, that really all does matter. It isn't just about getting attention. And it was at one point, Lord knows I tried, but it's not that. And when you are just out for clicks and likes, there is a shallowness to it. And it's
you can tell. No, you can tell. I'm because of geographically where I am, I'm like really like 3 hours from Toronto. There's not that many stores around me. All the stores that I could be going and doing, I already know all the people anyway. So the baking community in Ontario know me. So it's not like I can promote myself really heavily. So I've been really heavily promoting myself on podcasts, and it's fascinating to be on like those big podcaster groups with like 50,000 members, all looking for, there's podcasts for everything out there. The trend on those groups, and the admins know it very, very well, is that life coaches, for example, are being taught in their programs to start a podcast, to bring on guests who are your target, like clientele, and then offering them, oh, would you like a free call? It happened to me. I've had several podcast episodes where I was being interviewed, and the person switched over and was like, I think I could really help you. Do you want a call? I'm like, no, fuck off. But it's interesting, the quantity over quality, because the ones that are quality that I've had the really amazing time on, and most of them are like that. You can tell that they actually give a shit, that they're really targeting this to help people, that they're bringing guests on, not just because they want like 50,000 episodes. They really want every episode to be an experience, right? I think that's really key. Yeah.
And it's a rare thing. So again, you're doing a good job, sir. You're doing a great job,
Devin.
Absolutely.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I
appreciate it. We love you. My cat loves you. I love you. Everybody loves you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
This has been delightful. So I'll put all of your stuff down below. Is there anything? I mean, this is coming out pretty much today. Like, I'm just gonna release this right afterwards. Is there anything you want to promote? Anything? Any special?
I totally do. We've got the official Witches Sabbath is happening. We moved it to February. It usually was done in November, but we moved it back because we are working our way to creating a physical event for it, which has always been the intention. We were there before the pandemic, and the pandemic happened, so we just ended up putting it online. But we have a lot of high hopes for the official Witches Sabbath, and this year we actually were it's incredible. We got Silver Ravenwolf, who doesn't do appearances, who doesn't do stuff. She's coming in to teach, and the theme we're focusing on like DIY witchcraft, so making your own candles, blending your own oils, creating soap, working with sewing and other tactile things. And I tried to really make it as like practical as possible this year. And I have drug the other organizers into this because I don't think they were as excited about it as I was. So please come buy a ticket. That we've reduced the price this year, which hopefully that's okay with the teachers, but we ended up dropping it from $150 for the weekend to $95 for the weekend.
Wow.
And you get access. Yeah, it's me, Storm, Matt, we've got Tempest, we've got Silver Raven Wolf, Matt Venus is going to be there, Madame Pamina is going to be there. So like we got some really badass people to come in and teach. But yeah, so you can just go to modernwitch.com and find information. You can go to the official witchesabbat.com and find information. But tickets are available, and you can do it in person or you can do it online. Take it live. Something that we do that other online events don't do is that we actually do a hour-long session, and then we do a 30-minute Q&A that's moderated. So I'm there for every single class, and it's either me or Tempest, and we moderate the questions afterwards so that you can really get a response from the teacher in real time. And then everything is zipped up at the end, and you get sent a huge fat file that has not only all the videos, but every teacher provides at least an extra 15 minutes to 2 hours of extra content that gets put into what we refer to as the digital grimoire. And there's bonus articles and other things there. It's a lot. Like you get a lot for the experience because we're all witchcraft teachers and we want to do something really cool together. And that's why we do it. So the tickets are available now. Please go get it. Please go get them. Please.
That will be down below, people. So go and check it. Now that's physical location that's going to be in the Bay Area, right?
No, I can't say anything yet, but it's possible. It's possible. It's not. But I can't say anything yet because that's a whole brew of things that's been brewing for a couple of years. But the physical thing is definitely a goal, and it doesn't.
Sorry, I completely misunderstood. Sorry, this is the online version. Sorry,
I was just we're on online yet.
How much you were saying?
Hopefully, this is hopefully we won't be online for too long, but that's the goal. So we're inching our way towards that, which is it's a big thing, but that costs a lot of money. Getting a hotel block and doing that costs a lot of money, and I really believe that the event can support itself. So I'm trying not to super invest a lot of my personal money into it because I've done that in the past and it's been bad. So I'm trying not to, but yeah, so buy a ticket. It'll help us out. You get all this content. You'll have it forever. It's yours. You will, I guarantee you have a very awesome experience because we really care about the experience. There's a Discord community that is there where you can chat with people live all the time. Like it's amazing. So there's that. Then after that we've got horticulture and it's a very busy year. So my book is dropping, Houseplant Horticulture, so that'll be out, and at the same weekend we have horticulture, the event, right, which is happening. So if you are a plant magic person, come join us. So we've got like the world's best authors. Like if you're an author on the topic, you're probably at the event. And it's just amazing. Aaron Murphy Hiscock. We've got just
like you've got like Rebecca Bayer, Marcus. You've got Kobe.
Phenomenal people. Yeah. Well, and so Kobe is also does his event Botanica Obscura, and that's this other thing that's like amazing. So I'll be teaching there, but he has like a lot of events and stuff too. Yeah. So we're all really separate. Like that's the thing is like authors are actually like, if they're not full of shit, they're really supportive of each other. So like that's just who we are. So like we're all collabing, we're all working like this together. So that's happening in March. And then it's there's actually a lot of touring going on this year too. So I'll be all over the country. But in the immediate time, I would say go check out the official Witches Sabbat, get your ticket now. And come and celebrate and learn how to do some really cool stuff that a lot of us are probably out spending a lot of money on. Like you're probably spending a lot of money on candles, and you're probably spending a lot of money on oils and things like that, when you could learn to make them yourself in a quality level. Absolutely. And that's a big thing. Absolutely. So, and like, who doesn't want to learn oils from Matt Venus? I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? And I mean, Matt's amazing. I'm really, I'm speaking at his folklore, at their folklore and festival, folklore and witchcraft festival, and like just being online is amazing, let alone the in person. So
amazing. Love Matt. So we and Silver Raven Wolf. Hello, like that's just say what you want to say. I mean, people have this weird thing about the books that came out in the 90s, but I'm going to tell you, we would not be here without Silver Ravenwolf. So we all owe her a whole lot, whether you want to admit it or not. And she hasn't been teaching. She hasn't been going out in public and doing stuff for a very long time. So when you see her out and about, go. go do the thing, because we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know when she's going to be done with us, again, but go do it, because you're not going to get these opportunities. Just like, I kick myself. I'm so lucky I got to meet Buckland before he passed away. I'm so lucky that I've got to meet like Lori Cabot and some of these, there are people out there who matter, and we may not get to see them again. So you take the opportunities when you can to meet your elders, and we've got Silver Ravenwolf. So I'm so stoked that, and Silver is going to talk about like cool like sewing stuff. So like that's like a whole thing that like, I'm just saying, like, you get some cool, even if you're not a sewer, you get to sit down, you get to listen to her talk about her process. And she's one of the most prolific witches that's ever existed. So I don't know, maybe that's a good idea. So there's stuff like that. So there's definitely like, we really care, and it's just going to be such a good event. So go check that out. But otherwise, just modernwitch.com. We put everything up on there. And if you are interested in my sci-fi stuff and my fiction stuff, you just follow me on Facebook, and you'll see me drop links and all that good stuff. So yeah, perfect. Or just go to darrensparks.com. That exists too.
Oh, so you do have a website for that. I was going to ask if you, so that will all be in the show notes down below. And for those listening on Spotify, whatever, again, show notes on YouTube here, I'm going to put those physically in the video so that they're there just underneath your face there. Yeah, I did. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up now. It's wonderful. Devin, Darren, whoever you are at this moment, thank you so much.
Thank you for having been. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think actually you are the end. I don't think I have any other guests this season. So
Ta-da.
yeah, so you are like the penultimate. We started with an amazing person, we're ending with an amazing person, and throughout the, should be looking at my camera, not me on the screen. We've gone through quite a journey this season. For those of you who are watching and listening, thank you so much for joining me this season. I thank all of my guests who have come and joined me and been encountered in the woods. And we're going to start 2024 with my kitchen table talks. So this has been wandering through the woods, kind of encountering whoever, bears, a lot of bears. It's great. I love it. And then in 2024, I have people like Laura Tempest-Zackroft coming on. I've got Mortellus coming on. I've got some incredible guests coming on to add to the already incredible people I've already had. So join me in January. Go and look at Devin's various stuff down below. Look at the events. Most of those people I think I've already had on the show. So go and check out what they have to offer. And otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful Yule. I hope you all have a wonderful Yule, Devin, and everybody who lives with you. I will let you get back to your knitting. Everybody else, have a wonderful rest of the year, and we will see you next year. Thank you all.